to today's masterclass. As Nora rightly introduced, Kweku Odasara is my name, and I'll be your facilitator for today. Over the next 40 minutes tops, we'll take a deep dive to one of the most robust data protection backup and recovery solutions known as Veeam, and how it fits into Microsoft's portfolio. Before I move any further, I believe I can be heard. I'm audible enough, and my screen can be seen. Kindly send an acknowledgement by maybe a thumbs up if you can see my screen, please. Okay. Thank you. Also, as Nora said, there's a chat box, Q&A. In case you have any questions, you can send them to the chat and the team will help address them. Now, let's move to our agenda for today. Here's what we'll be covering in today's masterclass. We will take a quick introduction to Veeam, not from a vendor pitch angle, but rather from the perspective of why we as a solutions partner work with them and trust their technology. From there, I'll give you an overview of the Veeam solutions portfolio and highlight the capabilities that are most relevant to your business, especially where Veeam fits into Microsoft's ecosystem. Then we'll get into the core of our session, which is protecting Microsoft 365 data. We'll talk about why it's so important, the gaps that exist in Microsoft's own protection model, and how Veeam's architecture and features fill those gaps. Next, we'll go through deployment and licensing so you know what's involved in getting started, the different license options, and the flexibility to run in the cloud, on-premise or hybrid. After that, we'll move to a live demo so you can see exactly how it works in practice. And finally, wrap up with your questions and feedback. So without wasting my time, let's begin. About Veeam. Before we dive into the technical bits, let me set the stage with a quick introduction to Veeam. For those of us, maybe today might be the first time you are hearing about Veeam. Veeam has been around since 2006, and over the years, they've built a reputation as one of the most trusted names in backup, recovery, and ransomware protection. Now, what I like about Veeam is that they are not just tied to one environment. Their platform protects cloud workloads, virtual machines, physical servers, SaaS applications like Microsoft 365, and even Kubernetes, all in one ecosystem. At the heart of this is the Veeam data platform, which it tends to bring together instant recovery, monitoring, orchestration in a unified way, which is important because most of us here have a mix of workloads in different places, not just in the cloud or on-prem, but often both. Now, Veeam also plays nicely with tools many of us are already using, okay, with the likes of Microsoft 365, Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, and etc. And this flexibility is why it's such a good fit for a lot of us in our customers. And it's not just me saying this, but even Gartner has recognized Veeam as a leader in the Magic Quadrant for enterprise backup and recovery for more than 7 years straight. This tells you it's not just a momentary trend, okay, but rather it's a proven consistent performer in the industry. So when we talk about protecting Microsoft 365 today, it's backed by a vendor with real depth, real experience, and the flexibility to fit into your environment. So now we've got a sense of who or what Veeam is and why we work with them. Let's take a look at the range of solutions they offer and see where Microsoft 365 protection fits into that bigger picture. At the heart of this is the Veeam data platform. Think of this as the core package. Okay, it brings together backup, monitoring, recovery orchestration in one integrated solution. So the Veeam data platform includes Veeam Backup and Replication, Veeam One, and Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. I'll touch on these in a bit. Let's start with Veeam Backup and Replication. This is the workhorse. okay, what it does is it protects your virtual machines. So whether you are running VMware or Hyper-V, as well as physical servers or Windows or Linux, it also supports cloud workloads, and importantly, it has a built-in ransomware protection. So with Veeam Backup and Replication, recovery is mostly fast, it's flexible, and it's not limited to restoring to the original location. Then there is Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, which is the focus of our session today. It's purpose-built to protect Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Microsoft Teams, and etc. It's not just our backup, okay? It comes also with what we call granular recovery, e-discovery, and long-term retention. I'll touch on this in a bit more detail in the upcoming slides. Now, for those of us running workloads in the public cloud, there's Veeam Backup for AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. These are cloud-native agentless solutions that follow your policies, they optimize your costs, and protect directly within your cloud environment. So if you have any workload in AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, there is Veeam Backup for AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud to assist you protect and back up your data. Then there is Veeam One. Veeam One is all about monitoring, reporting, and alerting. So it helps with capacity planning, resource optimization, and can detect suspicious activities that might indicate ransomware. Next, we have Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. This takes care of disaster recovery planning. So what it does for you is it automates your workflows, ensures you can test and execute DR plans when you need them. Then there are the others. We have Veeam Casting for Kubernetes, which is purposely built for containerized workloads. There's Veeam Backup for Salesforce. As the name suggests, it backs up and protects Salesforce data and metadata. And finally, Veeam Backup Enterprise Manager. This is a centralized web console for managing Veeam Backup environment. So as you can see, Veeam isn't just about one workload type. It's a broad platform designed to protect and recover data wherever it lives. Now, let's move on into the next slide where we talk about some key capabilities of Veeam. First, we start with reliable backup and instant recovery. This is about confidence, okay? In the sense that if something should go wrong, whether it's a small data loss or a full system outage, you want to know your backups will work and that you can bring systems back online almost instantly. Now, I also mentioned that there is cloud, virtual, physical, and SaaS coverage. A lot of organizations today don't just live in one environment. So you might have Microsoft 365 in the cloud, virtual machines on-prem, and physical servers in branch offices somewhere. Veeam covers all these platforms. Then ransomware protection and immutability. Ransomware is unfortunately a daily reality now. And immutability means your backup data can't be changed or deleted even by an attacker. That's your safety net, okay? So it's giving you assurances that you can always restore your data in case of any uncertainties. Another big one is granular recovery and e-discovery. This is the ability to restore exactly what you need. For example, you might want to restore a specific email, a Teams message, a SharePoint site, without necessarily rolling back everything. And with this, you can also search across backups for specific content, which can be critical for some legal and compliance needs. Then we have monitoring and analytics with Veeam One. I think I mentioned what Veeam One does in the previous slide, as it keeps your backup environment healthy and alerts you before little issues become big problems. So mainly Veeam One is for monitoring. Then we have disaster recovery orchestration. This means you don't just have backups, okay? You have an actual plan to bring systems online in a predictable, tested way if something major happens. Then there is storage, agnostics, and multi-cloud support. This means you are not logged into a single vendor or cloud provider. You can store backups where it makes sense. So you can store your backups in your data center, in the cloud, AWS, Azure, or a mix of all these three. Then finally, API and automation friendly. For teams that like to script or integrate backups into other workflows, Veeam plays nicely with automation tools, which saves time and reduces manual work. Now, all these capabilities come together to make Veeam a platform that is not just about storing copies of your data, but about making data recoverable, secure, and always available when you need it. Now let's narrow our focus to the Microsoft ecosystem and drill into Microsoft 365 protection specifically, and uncover why, even though it's in the cloud, it still needs a dedicated backup strategy. Now, why do we need to back up Microsoft 365? After all, one will say it's in the cloud, so Microsoft got it covered. And I'm sure that is what most of us think. Well, here's the truth. Microsoft operates under what's called the shared responsibility model. We'll take a deeper look at it in the next slide. What this means is Microsoft will guarantee the availability of the infrastructure, the service, the uptime, and the platform itself. But when it comes to your data, so in essence, your emails, your Teams messages, your SharePoint sites, your data in your OneDrive for business, that's your responsibility. And even Microsoft says in their own documentation that they recommend using third-party backup. Now, here's where it gets tricky. To an extent, Microsoft has limited native retention policies. So if you delete an email by an accident, depending on the policy, it might only stick around for some 30 to 90 days in total before it's gone forever. Once it's gone from the recycle bin or wherever, or the retention policy expires, that's it. It's unrecoverable. And that brings me to accidental deletion. It's not always a disaster scenario. Sometimes a user or even an admin deletes something, thinking it's no longer needed, only to find out weeks later that it was critical. By then, with native tools, it might be too late. Then there is security threats. Ransomware can still hit the cloud. It can still hit cloud data. For example, if it's synced to a local OneDrive folder and that machine gets infected, encrypted files can still sync into the cloud. And let's not forget, maybe we have some disgruntled employees, maybe departing the organization. A disgruntled employee wouldn't mind deleting important files or messages before leaving. And these are all reasons why we need to back up our Microsoft 365 data. Also, there is legal and compliance requirements. For example, if you work in a regulated institution, let's say the healthcare, education, and finance, by law, you might need to keep data for years. And this retention period might be far beyond what Microsoft's policy allows. So you might also need some powerful e-discovery capabilities to set across all historical data. Then we have granular recovery and fast recovery. With this, instead of restoring an entire mailbox or whole SharePoint site, you can restore a single email, a specific Teams chat, or one file instantly. I think I've mentioned this in the previous slides. Then finally, we have peace of mind. Now, this for my IT admins, especially when you know for a fact that every Microsoft 365 item is backed up, searchable, and recoverable. You tend to remove a huge amount of operational risks from your team. So in a nutshell, these are the main reasons why it's important for us to ensure our Microsoft 365 data is always backed up and protected. Now let's look into detail about the shared responsibility model and why it's so important. With the shared responsibility model, here's a simple way to think about it. Okay, let's imagine you are renting an apartment, okay, in a secure building. The landlord makes sure the building is safe. So they maintain the handles on the locks, the main doors, they check the lights in the hallway, they ensure the physical structure, that is the building itself, is in good condition. That's Microsoft in this case. Okay, so Microsoft in our use case is the landlord. So they make sure the Microsoft 365 service is up, the data centers are secure, and the systems are fault tolerant. But inside your apartment, that's your space. If you leave your windows open or you misplace your belongings, the landlord, in our case, Microsoft, won't replace your stuff. That's you, the customer. You are responsible for the actual data inside your Microsoft 365, the tenant. So in practice, Microsoft responsibilities are they keep the service up and available. They maintain the physical infrastructure and data durability. They make sure the platform is resilient and fault tolerant. Then you, the customer, your responsibilities will also be protecting your data from accidental deletion, guarding against security threats like ransomware or compromised accounts, configuring retention policies correctly. And again, I'm stressing on the word correctly, configuring retention policies correctly, meeting your legal and compliance requirements, and ensure that you can recover data years down the line if you need to. So when we talk about the shared responsibility model, the key takeaway here is Microsoft protects the platform and you, the customer, protects your data. Now, with that in mind, let's look at how Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 is designed and how it fits, how its architecture makes sure you are meeting your side of the responsibility. At the highest level, there are 4 main building blocks. Okay, so let's use a use case for this so we all understand what each of the architecture does. So let's take, for instance, a delivery service scenario. So we'll situate that to the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 architecture. Now, in a delivery service, you've got a control center. You've got delivery vans. There's a warehouse, and there are customers you serve. For Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 architecture, we have the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 server. This is your control center. So in our use case, this will be our control center. What this does is the central management console where you set up schedules, you create backup jobs, and monitor operations. So if you're an IT admin, this is where you live day to day when managing backups. Then we have the proxy service. So these are like your delivery vans. What the proxy service or the backup proxy does is they go out, collect the data from Microsoft 365, and bring it back for safekeeping. Then we have backup repository. This will be your warehouse. So it's where all your backup data is stored. So it could be on a local disk, on a NAS storage, or even in the cloud. So for those of us who are comfortable with creating a cloud storage and backing up data there, so we can use Azure Blob Storage or Amazon S3 for that. Then finally, we have Microsoft 365 organization. In our analogy, this will be the customers that we are serving. So this is the actual data you are protecting. So your Exchange, your SharePoint, your OneDrive for Business, your Teams. Yes. So on a high level, these are the building blocks for Microsoft for Veeam Backup for M365. Now, let's explore some of the key features in our next slide. I've been speaking about granular recovery. What exactly it is it? With Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, you are not forced to restore an entire mailbox or a SharePoint site just to get one missing file. Okay, you can go straight to the exact item you need or search for it and restore it. You can also restore that item right back to its original location or send it to a different user, or even export it into other formats like PST, MSG, and more. And for ransomware recovery, you can even roll back to a specific point in time using a snapshot taken before the attack. Now, licensing. Licensing for Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 is actually pretty straightforward. Okay, it's based on the number of user accounts you protect. So if you are backing up 50 users, you need 50 licenses. One license will cover the user's mailbox, their OneDrive for business, their personal SharePoint sites, all under the same unit. So you don't pay for extra mailboxes for the same person, as those are included as part of the user's coverage. Now, licenses are also flexible. So assuming a user leaves the company and you stop backing them up, the license is automatically freed up after 31 days and can be assigned to someone else. So when it comes to license to back up Microsoft 365 data, it is designed for you to only pay for active accounts, not for dormant or unused ones. We'll look at the different licenses in a moment, but at the core, it's simply one user, one license, and all their Microsoft 365 data covered. Now that we know licensing is based on the number of users you protect, let's quickly touch on the types of licenses you can choose from and how you can deploy the solution. First, we have subscription license. This is the most common. So almost every customer is given a subscription license. So you pay for maybe 1 to 5 years in advance, and it's fully functional. It comes with all the features included. Then there is a rental license. This is mostly geared towards service providers. So if you are not a service provider and you request for a license, Veeam is not going to give you this kind of license. This is billed monthly, so it's very flexible if your user account changes often. Then there's a not for resale license. So that is mainly for partners like us to do demos, trainings, and education. It's fully functional, but it's not for production use. Then there is an evaluation license, which is a short-term license. Maybe you want to test how the whole Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 works. You want to see how the backup works. You want to see how the restore and the recovery works. You can be given an evaluation license to test things out before you commit. Now, what are the deployment options? Because Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 is flexible in how you run it, okay? There are 3 main deployment options. So you can decide to go with the cloud only, which is known as Veeam Data Cloud for Microsoft 365. With this model, everything runs in the cloud. So your backup server and storage, they are all hosted. You only go there and do the configurations. Then we have on-prem, which is what most customers are familiar with. Actually, the on-premise one has been in the system for a while now. So that is the most popular. With this model, you run the backup server and store backups in your own data center or office. So that is the difference between the cloud and the on-premise one. The on-premise one, you manage everything in your data center, but with the cloud only deployment, it's provided for you in the cloud and you work there. Then finally, hybrid, which is a mix of both. For example, you might run the backup server on-prem, but store backups in Azure Blob or Amazon S3 for offsite protection. Yeah. Now the beauty is when you start with one deployment model, you are not logged in. So no matter which option you choose, the licensing also works the same way. So one user, one license. Now let's dive into our demo session for today. For today's demo, I'm going to keep it simple. So we focus on the essentials. As in, we are going to set up a basic backup job for Microsoft 365 and how we do a straightforward restore. Okay, there's a lot more Veeam can do. So there are things like advanced search and compliance, e-discovery. There are self-service restores. But those could be sessions on their own. Today, I just want to give a clear picture on how easy it is to get started. So let me bring up my console so we begin. Okay. So if you should log into the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 console. This is how it looks like. So at the very top here, you see some tabs that says add an organization. They are edit, remove organization, backup, explore, and report. Because we've not added any organization yet, that is how you see all these are being bled out. Also, when we come down here, we see organization tab. So anything you want to do with the organization, you select this tab. There's a backup infrastructure. This is where we add our backup repositories. Okay, then there's the history where you can go back and check what has happened whilst you were away. So let's start with adding an organization. That is one of the first things you can do. So you can either add an organization or you add a backup repository. We are going to do all of these things, but let's start with adding an organization first. So to add an organization, we are going to select the tab here to add an organization. Then it asks us, select the organization deployment type, whether Microsoft 365, whether hybrid, whether on-premise. For our use case, we are dealing with Microsoft 365, so we are going to leave it at the default. Then we are given the option to select the services we want to protect. So I'm going to leave it at the default and check the box for Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and OneDrive for Business and Microsoft Teams. And I'll click Next. Next, we need to add a region. Okay, by default, and this is what mostly everybody selects, unless you are within the jurisdictions of China or US government or other. You just choose the default. Then you select modern authentication. There used to be basic authentication, but Microsoft has deprecated basic authentication. So there's a footnote here for you to know that this is grayed out because it's been deprecated by Microsoft. So select Next. Then because there's a new organization we are adding, we need to register a new Microsoft Entra ID application. So I'll click on Next. Then I'll give it a name. So I'm going to call it demo. Then it's going to prompt me to install a certificate. So I'll click on install. If you have a certificate of your own, you can import the certificate. But I don't have a certificate here, so I'm going to generate a new self-signed certificate. Then I'm going to give it a friendly name. And I'll click on finish. Then I'll select next. So now I need to authenticate. So to authenticate, I'll copy the code here and I'll sign in with a service account that has the required administrator rules assigned to it. So I'll click next. So this is the account I'm using. I'll select done. Okay, so it now tells me you've signed in to the Microsoft Azure cross-platform command line interface application on your device. You may now close this window. So I'm done here, so I'll close the window and now I'll see that it tells me you're authenticated to Microsoft 365 with the service account that I added. So I'm going to click next here. Then now it's going to connect to the specific services and add the organization for me. So there's not going to take much time. So let's give it some time. So you can see it's configured the Microsoft Entra ID application. It's connected to the Microsoft Graph. It's connected to Exchange Web Services. Then it connected to Microsoft. Then it connected to Exchange Online Plan and SharePoint Online Plan. Can you hear me now? Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. So now you can see the organization being added here. This is the fallback domain of the tenant. So now we have organization added. Now let's go ahead and create a backup repository so that we can back up our 365 data onto that. So to do that, we come to backup repositories here. Then we select add repository. Then we can give it a name. So we can choose to select a backup to object storage or to a local disk. So when I say object storage, that means cloud-based. So you want to add an Azure Blob Storage or Amazon AWS S3. So for our demo, we are going to back up to a local disk. Then I'll select next. Then I'll leave the proxy as default. Then I'll browse. I'll select this drive. I'll create a new folder. I'll create the folder. I'll click next. Then we have retention policy settings. So you can choose how long you want the data to be stored on the repository. So there are 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and above. I'll leave it as a default to 3 years. Now click on finish. Okay, so now we have our organization being added. Then we have our backup repository also being created. So the next thing for us to do is to create a backup job. Okay, so I'm going to back up some test users in the tenant. I'm going to back specifically their mailboxes. And after that, we'll try and do a restore and we see how that works. So to create a backup job, I'll select the organization, right click, and click on add backup job. I'll give it a name. Click next. Then I get 2 options to back up the entire organization or to back up the following objects. When I select back up the entire organization, what it's going to do is it's going to back up every user identity in the organization. So provided you have the required license to cover all that, you can do that. But mostly the best option is to back up the following objects. So you select the specific users that you want to back up their data. So I'm going to click on add and select users. It's going to load. So for this test case, I'm going to select Nora and Beatrice. And I don't want to back up all the 365 data. So I'm going to edit it and I'll select only their mailboxes. So to make it quicker. And I'm not going to exclude anything. So I click on next. Then I select the repository that I just created, which is this repository here. I click OK and I click next. Then I select scheduling options. So this is how you want your backup job to run. So if you want the backup job to run automatically at this time, every day or every workday, weekends, Mondays, the option is yours. You can choose what you want at this side. Then retry field objects processing. This means that there might be an instance whereby due to network issues, a backup job might fail. So what happens if the backup job fails? Okay, you want the backup job to retry to back up the data. So how many times do you want that retry attempt to be executed? So I'll leave it as a default 3. You can change it to whichever value you want. Then wait before each retry attempt. So we are saying if a backup job fails, you should wait for 10 minutes before it retries backing up the data again. Then we have what happens when we click create. So we'll start the job, then I'll click create. So you can see in action that the backup has started, it's running here. It's found 2 objects, it's connected to the organization. We didn't exclude anything, so it skipped that. Then it's waiting for processing. So it's processing Nora's mailbox and it's processing Beatrice's mailbox. So let's give it some time. It's going to finish very soon because there's no more data in their mailboxes. So yes, so now the backup job has executed successfully. We got a notification. Yes, and it finished at this time. So now we backed up Nora and Beatrice's mailbox. If we should take a look at Nora's mailbox here, you see Nora has some emails in here, some test mails here that we created for Nora. So assuming maybe something happens and Nora should lose some of these information here, and she wants to maybe restore. So for example, if we should go ahead and let's say remove, delete these mails from myself and from Barbara. And we clear them from the deleted items permanently. Now there will be no way to recover these mailboxes again. So this is what I was talking about earlier, that there are instances whereby you might delete something that you think maybe is no longer needed. Then later on, maybe your line manager or your boss comes asking you for it, then you are found wanting. So now let's go back to the backup console and try and restore these mailboxes so they show up in Nora's mailbox now. So to do a restore, what you will do is you select the backup job you created. Then you select explore latest exchange state. So let's give it some time. The Veeam Explorer is going to open very soon. Okay, so now Veeam Explorer for Microsoft Exchange is opened. Now, this is the tenant we added, or this is the organization we added. If we drop down, we see the 2 users whose data we backed up. So we were using Nora in our use case. If I should come to the inbox here, so we can see all the emails that were previously in Nora's mailbox, but Nora doesn't have access to it anymore. But over here, we can see it here. We can double click to open and see the content of each mailbox as they were in Nora's Outlook. So now let's restore this back to Nora so she can be happy now, since her boss is on her neck for the contents. So to do a restore, we'll select the specific mailboxes we want to restore. Then we restore to Nora's mailbox. We can also decide to restore to, we can export to as a PST file or save to MSG, or we can restore to a different user's mailbox. So for test purposes, let's select, we are restoring to Nora's mailbox. Then this time around, I'm going to authenticate with certificate based. You can authenticate with a one-time password. As I mentioned earlier, basic authentication is deprecated. So you can either authenticate with a one-time password or a certificate base. So I've used the one-time password before. So let's take a look at how to authenticate when you're using the certificates. So it will prompt us to select the certificate that we want to use. So I'll select the certificate that I created earlier. As you can see, it's here. That's the Masterclass set. And I'll click next. And now it's going to prompt me to enter the administrator account that I've been using for impersonating the mailboxes. So I'm going to enter it here as well. Then I'll click restore. So as you can see, we've successfully restored these two emails back into Norris mailbox. So if you should come to Norris mailbox here, you can see the two emails now showing into Norris mailbox. So for our use case, this is just a short way to demo how to create a simple backup job and restore to the user's mailbox. There's also another option where which is known as the self-service portal. And for that, you, the admin, you don't restore the mailboxes on behalf of the users. The users tend to go to the self-service restore portal and they restore their data on their own. Yes, but most admins wouldn't allow that. So basically, this brings me to the end of my presentation.